Welcome back to Haunted and Historic Australia for another episode in our Ghost series. We're getting a few now. In this episode, we take a look at what's haunting the Jenolan Caves. We've all been on a ghost tour. Well, most of us have. I know I have. Several. And it's always good when you get a tour guide who's really enthused. They've got a lot of energy and knowledge behind them. They're running around and acting out, and it's just a great experience. They genuinely love their job, but at the end of the day, they go home. But what if some of them didn't go home? What if they decide to stay? Never leave. Ever. Now, this is an interesting story about tour guides who never left Jenolan Caves and to this day still haunt the current tour guides. Maybe they're supervising still, keeping an eye on everyone, making sure everything's going as it should. In the Illustrated Guide to Australian Places back in 1995, there was a little portion on the Jenolan Caves, and it read, "After a sometimes hair-raising drive along a road clinging to the steeply sided ridges of a spur of the Great Dividing Range, intrepid travellers to Jenolan Caves are rewarded with a view of the bitumen road surface disappearing into the black, gaping maw of the 24-metre high Grand Arch. The spectacular introduction to Jenolan Caves is matched by what is on offer underground." Now, Jenolan Caves, Australia's best-known limestone cave system, is 175 kilometres or 108 miles west of Sydney. The caves are exciting, extensive and mysterious, and so are the ghosts. One current cave guide tells of being tapped on the shoulder several times by nobody, literally. Having her legs grabbed and shaken by an unseen force on the stairs, and seeing orbs briefly in the mud tunnel. Another guide, one who tended to be a skeptic about such occurrences, was in the shrine area of the Ribbon Cave at the very dead end of the passage when he heard footsteps approaching from behind. As he was doing maintenance work and not conducting a tour, no one else should have been there. Yet the footsteps continued. They stopped right behind him. Then he heard a sound like a person clearing their throat. Wow. So much for his skepticism. He took off running from the cave as fast as he could, not even looking back for a split second. Once outside, he realised he'd broken a cardinal rule by leaving the lights on. A conscientious guide, he timidly returned to the cave to switch them off, carefully checking to ensure there was no one else lurking. Did he believe a ghost had been standing behind him? "Well, I didn't," he said later, "but I can't explain it any other way." At another time, the same guide was walking through the Lucas Cave collecting litter. He paused for a while in the cathedral and became aware of a dark figure on the other side of the chamber. When he shone his torch at the figure, the light from the torch mysteriously died. Turning the torch away from the figure made it work again. He began to suspect the figure was more ghostly than human. As he progressed through the cave, the figure followed from a distance. Each time he shone his torch in the direction of the figure, the light died. Yet as soon as he faced it in the opposite direction, it came back on. This happened throughout the cave. With considerable difficulty, the skeptical guide eventually had no choice but to accept that the figure was one of Jenolan's ghosts, who was apparently keeping its eye on him. That's hardly surprising, considering that many of the Jenolan guides insist that two old tour guides, long since deceased, still loiter around Jenolan Caves and appear to have made their spiritual home in these familiar surroundings. While their reappearance sometimes startles visitors, to most of the living tour guides, they're simply friendly supervisors. One of these may very well be James Wibbard. Known to his friends as Voss, James was a veteran caver. He was employed as a guide at Jenolan in 1885 at the age of 18, and in 1903 he became superintendent, a position he retained until his retirement in 1932 at the age of 65. Throughout those years, James Wibberd regularly explored the numerous labyrinth extensions with only the flickering light of a candle to guide him. Several exciting caves he discovered have since been opened up to visitors. On a Jenolan Caves blog, it states, James Wibberd died in 1942. It is said that his ashes were buried at Jenolan in an inaccessible crevice deep in the labyrinth to which he devoted his life. How interesting. The Jenolan Caves were his life, so one can understand why such familiar and beloved surroundings would become James Wibberd's spiritual home. Perhaps as a long-term superintendent, he also feels the need to continue supervising the new guides. Imagine that. Here's a story told to us by one of the cave guides. Sometimes we have wedding ceremonies conducted in the cathedral at Jenolan Caves. This particular bride later returned to become one of our tour guides. A guest at her wedding was her great aunt, a sensitive who could perceive the other world. "Who is that strange man standing behind the best man?" asked the great aunt. "He looks very stern and serious." When told there wasn't anyone standing behind the best man, she replied, "I can never tell the difference between the living and the passed on." She was then asked to describe the man and his clothing. It was a perfect description of James Wibberd, identified from photographs in our collection. Another experience is told on the Jenolan Caves website. Again, the finger of suspicion is pointed at explorer, guide and caretaker James Wibberd. Here is an abbreviated version of cave guide Jeff Melbourne's account. "I was taking a regular tour through the river cave. The path runs alongside the pool of reflections, and I leant over the railing, looking into the crystal clear water, and saw something on the bottom. Something standing next to me said, 'It's a button off an old tunic. Look, there's another one over there.' I didn't look at the person speaking, and after staring in the water for a few moments more, I started moving the group on, but there had been no one standing next to me. The closest man was several meters away, and he called out, 'What happened to the guy in between us?' I asked him what he looked like, and was told he was a tall man wearing a rumpled grey suit. There was nobody of that description in the group. I then asked the group if any of them had spoken to me about what was in the water. They all shook their heads. No one knew what I was talking about. But this anecdote isn't quite finished yet. A week later, the same guide passed the spot again with another group. One visitor said he was glad to get out of that part of the river cave. "Why?" asked the tour guide. "I saw someone in the shadows sitting on a rock watching us," he was told. "What did he look like?" queried the guide. "Oh, he was an old man in a suit," came the reply. The guide speculates the person who spoke to him and the one seen in the shadows on the rock a week later was the spirit of James Wibberd. The other former guide frequently seen in and around Jenolan Caves is the first ever guide, Jeremiah Wilson, who was appointed keeper in 1867. It was 2 decades before James Wibberd was employed as a guide. Many believe that Jeremiah Wilson still remains at Jenolan Caves today, along with his wife, Lucinda. Tour guide Corey Camilleri recalled a story involving Jeremiah. "I was conducting one of the tours and passed through a section that is relatively spooky, with rustic handrails, unused historic electric lighting and rough floors, and the dancing shadows from my lantern playing on the sides. A gent said he saw a figure and described it to all of us, that he'd seen the spirit of Jeremiah Wilson. Fortunately, we were later able to go out to our office where I had a photograph of Jeremiah Wilson for comparison. The gent said it was a younger version of the man that he'd seen in the cave." The Jenolan Cave blog site provides a further ghostly encounter told by yet another caves guide, Alan. I was taking a group through the Imperial Cave one evening, and we stopped to wait for everyone to catch up. Uneasily, a young couple came up to me and started telling me that they'd just been in Cave's house dining room for dinner, and something strange happened. As the tour group gathered around us, the woman said that when they were sitting at dinner, her partner said to her, "There's a woman over there staring at us." Well, no one else could see the woman, so I asked the man, "What did she look like?" The man replied, "She looked to be in her 40s or 50s in period dress of around 100 years ago. Her hair was pulled severely up and back." I explained that the apparition roughly fit the description of Lucinda Wilson. She and her husband Jeremiah built the original cave house, and she was more or less the accommodation manager. Still there to greet people, clearly. The original caves house where Lucinda worked was located along the Jenolan Caves, but was partially destroyed by fire in 1896. The new rambling 4-storey guest house complex was built from limestone quarried on the site. It is today recognised as one of the finest large guest houses still functioning and receiving heritage protection in 2004. It was at the original Caves house that public servant William Ridley recuperated after falling 56 feet or 17 metres through a hole in the Nettle Cave to the floor of the Imperial Cave below in 1887. This prompting Jeremiah Wilson to adequately provide light inside the caves so as to prevent this from happening again. And this was when the electrical light was put through the caves. Visitors today still hear about Ridley's remarkable survival, and his route to the Imperial Cave is popularly known as Ridley's shortcut. Just don't fall in. However, Ridley's fame may be causing irritation to at least one ethereal occupant of the cave, namely John Jack Edwards, who was employed as a guide at Jenolan when this incident occurred. Jack Edwards became a Jenolan guide in 1886 and spent 22 years working with James Wibbard and Jeremiah Wilson. He lived with his family in a house about 3/4 of a mile, 1,200 metres, away up a steep track in the Jenolan Reserve, high above the main road. Jack worked long hours, 8:30 in the morning to 9 at night, often not returning home until midnight. Yet rarely does he rate so much as a mention during cave tours. Meanwhile, Ridley's fall and stories about Jeremiah Wilson and James Wibbard are told over and over again to new cave visitors. Hardly surprising that Jack may feel a little put out. Shortly before Christmas in 1908, Jack had stopped to light a cigarette during his long walk along the tracks toward home. He was later found unconscious, lying on the road immediately below the track. Perhaps he had dozed off and fell, or maybe he was struck by a falling boulder. No one knows. He died in the early hours of the following morning. More than a century after Jack's death, a television cameraman was filming a documentary in the Imperial Cave and was told of the story of Ridley's shortcut. The cameraman also used an EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, digital recorder, which caught 2 messages from a similar voice during filming. The first message was, "The crystal grows an inch in 1,000 years." This was a typical tour guide statement and was presumed to be from one of the ghostly guides. But which one? The next EVP recording, in the same voice, confirmed he was a guide. "My name is John Edwards, not Ridley." How bizarre. He didn't say so, but no doubt Edwards was thinking, 22 years of hard work and long hours until the day I died, yet Ridley gets all the attention just because he fell over? Jeremiah Wilson also had something important to impart to the living, but he chose a most unusual way of doing so. A Canadian lady was visiting Australia with her daughter and granddaughter. They travelled in a camper van, taking their time and visiting touristy spots that appealed to them. They called into Jenolan and took one of the cave tours. Towards the end of the tour, she said, "I bet there's some really interesting stories about Jenolan." And the guide replied, "Oh yes, we do delve into that on one particular tour, our Legends, Mysteries and Ghost tour." He mentioned a particular story known to all the guides about a group who had come into a cave and saw a little girl, aged about 8 years, who was wearing a white dress. She was a ghost because they described her dissipating down the stairs. Some were really worried that they had to walk past that section, and they said, "No, we don't want to go there. We'll go back the way we came in." And they did. The Canadian woman explained to the guide that she was a ghost whisperer. She worked as someone who clears ghosts from people's houses, releasing their spirit so they are free to go to the light. She had recently been working in a chalet in France. The Canadian ladies departed, but a few weeks later they returned, very excited, to Jenolan Caves. They said that they had an interesting passenger, a hitchhiker, who said his name was Jeremiah Wilson, Jenolan's first tour guide from 1867 to 1900. As luck had it, they ran into the same guide that took them on the Imperial tour, and she told him the story of Jeremiah. She reported he had said some things that didn't make sense to them, and perhaps that he could shed some light on it. Jeremiah had said he didn't lose his mind and that it was a plot to get rid of him, so Fred could have his job. He also said that he didn't steal any horses. Well, what the Canadian lady reported referred to little-known facts about the final year, 1900, of Jeremiah's career. Even most of the current tour guides knew nothing about them. In 1900, it was claimed Jeremiah had gone crazy after becoming lost in the Jubilee Cave that he was exploring. His brother Fred rescued him and did indeed become his successor. And yes, Jeremiah had been accused of stealing horses. He'd actually appeared before the Bathurst Circuit Court on 11th of October 1900 and pleaded guilty not to stealing the horses, but to having received them as stolen goods. His defence lawyer claimed he had been the dupe of someone else, and that he had been more sinned against than having ever sinned. Even so, he was sentenced to 15 months hard labour in Bathurst jail, and while he was incarcerated, his property was sold due to bankruptcy. Needless to say, he wouldn't have been very happy about that, especially if you reckon someone was setting him up like his brother. With remissions, Jeremiah emerged from the prison a year and a week later. He was a broken shadow of the fine, strong man he had once been. He never regained his former self-esteem, withdrew from company, and was regularly seen sitting with his head bowed. Jeremiah died in 1907. Perhaps he had been waiting all those years for a sympathetic ghost whisperer's ear so that he could finally set the record straight. He didn't lose his mind, and he didn't steal those darn horses. Now, they say that there's quite a bit of quartz in the caves, embedded in the limestone, and that the quartz is actually able to store energy, and that energy, which is in everything, releases itself, and the spirit in which is stored inside. So that's quite an interesting theory, and they actually call it the stone tape theory, kind of like replaying a video. They say the stored energy may somehow be able to release itself in sort of a replay, a full manifestation or partial sounds, such as voices or footsteps. Wow, what a place! Jenolan Caves. So many ghosts and tales, mysteries and suspense. Well, it's definitely somewhere I'm going to go and have a look at. I haven't been there since I was 5 and I can't remember a thing of it then. So I think it's definitely a place for Haunted Historic Australia to check out in the near future, amongst all the others that we bring to you each week. Comment down if you've been to Jenolan Caves and if you've ever seen anything there, or are you familiar with the tales of the area? So, if you enjoyed this story, why not hit that like button? And while you're hitting things, go and hit that notification bell as well, and make sure you're set to all notifications so you're aware when we're posting up more Aussie ghost stories.
Well, upon my soul. Do you want to come in? I believe it does. Well, then, come on. Who sent you to me? Are you some dark-winged messenger from beyond? Answer me, monster. Tell me truly. Shall I ever hold again that radiant maiden whom the angels call Lenore?
How the hell should I know? What am I, a fortune teller? Ooh, I'm chilled to the bones. Why don't you give me some wine? Well, don't just stand there gaping at me.
That voice,
Will you give me some wine?
Yes, yes. Here's some nice hot milk.
Milk? How vomitable.
Surely this is a dream.
Hurry up, will you?
There you are.
What do you expect me to do, hold it? With what? Oh, never mind. I like that.
Upon my soul.
Never mind your soul. Start concentrating on getting me back to my rightful form.
Your rightful form?
Well, what do you think? I was born this way?
Well, I have it. You are under an enchantment.
Took you long enough to find that out.